came into the sanctuary the other day to this disturbing sight. All of our beautiful Christmas poinsettias that were just in rows up here, glorious in their beauty, they were all gone. And the ones that were left, the leftovers were what we could call them puny. I think that might be generous to call those poinsettias kind of puny. And what was even worse is that these dying plants, they were all gathered around the nativity scene. And I was like, my heart just sank in that moment. And I was like, Christmas is over. How many of you guys have not taken your Christmas decorations down yet, but they're staring at you? And you know that they have to be taken care of here pretty quickly, right? It's that sad realization, that recognition of, the Christmas season is over. But then I took another moment or two and I was just kind of looking at the scene. And I thought to myself, maybe these two symbols, the beautiful poinsettia symbol and the nativity symbol, maybe they can serve, now the poinsettia is looking puny, maybe they can serve as a perfect reminder of a greater truth that transcends Christmas and that will carry us, that has the power to carry us into 2022. And that is, life goes on. As life goes on, the Christ child sits right in the middle of it. We talked about it over and over in the Advent season that we don't just celebrate the one time coming. That time way back when Jesus came and was born into the world, but we're reminded over and over that the gospel is about God coming again and again and again. And here this morning again, God comes, the Christ child comes right here, right now. That's a hopeful thing to think about. It reminded me of the song that Tyler just sang. I'm going to reread some of these lyrics real quick because the hope of the Christ child influences it. It helps us to re-envision our own story. Because ours is a God that turns graves into gardens. Ours is a God who turns bones into armies. That's Ezekiel. Remember the dry bones being called out. Ours is a God who turns seas into highways. You're the only one who can. How many of you guys, looking down the 2022 that's just that we're standing there on the precipice, how many of you guys are pretty worn out? Would you admit that the prospect of jumping in, let's go get them 2022 is just kind of like, man, just not there with you this year. I'm pretty worn out. I'm pretty exhausted by the idea of doing it again. Another year. And yet, we are met by the Christ child, this message of the coming of God that reminds us that there is hope, that there is possibility, that there is new opportunities ahead of us, and there is strength for one day at a time that will carry us every single step. Go to that picture, if you would, real quick. Have you ever seen somebody replant their poinsettia? These things can explode. You got to keep them away from your dogs. They are poisonous with dogs, but these things have the potential to explode. You would never think that the puny little plants that were sitting here just a few days ago could explode into something so full of life and so full of color. Under that scripture passage, I want to set the context for where we're headed today. This passage from Psalm 30. Lord my God, the psalmist cries out, I called to you for help and you healed me. You turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my sackcloth, which is essentially your funeral clothes. You removed my funeral clothes and clothed me with joy, that my heart may sing your praises and not be silent. Lord my God, I will praise you forever. You turn my story around. You give me a new narrative of hope. So this morning, we begin a 3-week series entitled Embracing the New. We all stand on the cusp of a brand new year. Jason found this graphic, and I don't know if you kind of resonate with this. We kind of laughed in the office because maybe we could just characterize all of 2020 and 2021 as that kind of the rear view mirror, right? Does it kind of feel a little bit like that? Does it feel kind of like a dumpster fire behind us, right? And we're hoping that we're moving. We haven't come to the end. We know the pandemic isn't over. We know that there are plenty of people getting Omicron, but we feel like we're probably moving out of the worst of it. And there's hope on the horizon. There's hope calling us forward. But we're asking, as we stand on the cusp of this new year, we ask, where do we go from here? And one thing that I want as we begin to think about this, we think about where we want to go. We want to go forward with wisdom. We want to go forward with thoughtfulness and with faith. We don't want to just go forward. And one of the things I want us to think about, I was reading about this past week. It's a thought that was published by Walter Brueggemann. And it's the thought that each and every one of us, and us collectively, were entrusted this moment. That I'm not saying that God brought the pandemic. That is not at all my theology. But I think that God knew this pandemic was coming. And it's to these generations right here that sit in this room that this moment in history was entrusted. And we will make our own decisions about what we do with the turmoil and the questions and the challenges and the opportunities of this moment. We will decide how we will lead in our homes and in our job places and in our neighborhoods. We'll decide. We'll have significant influence. We will either choose to be people that are reconcilers or we'll widen the divide. We'll bring in light and hope and possibility or more fear and more defeatism. We'll have an opportunity to put our mark on where things go from here. This has been entrusted to us. So let me offer you a model that's been very helpful to me. I was introduced to this model of this cycle of orientation years ago, and some of you, I see you kind of nodding your heads. You're kind of familiar with this. It's a model that was first articulated by Walter Brueggemann. And it's a way not only of us kind of tracing cycles within our own life, but we also can see it in our spiritual lives as well. And we see it in the life of the people of God within the Hebrew people in the Psalms. You can trace this cycle of orientation first. So orientation essentially is a time or a season in life where things are going pretty well. It's a time when we say, God, thank you for what you've provided for me. Things are going kind of as planned. And I mean, it's not a perfect time because life is never perfect, but it's a time where kind of like if it was a river, it would be kind of a nice, even flowing stream. Things are going well. Things are going as planned. You can kind of identify times in your life where things were kind of on track. And then inevitably, that even flowing stream, at some point, whether it be some really traumatic thing or some smaller thing, it kind of goes off a waterfall. And you are disoriented. You move into a season or to a time of disorientation. It's a time when maybe it's kicked off by, I don't know, maybe a diagnosis within your family, within a loved one. Maybe it's a loss of a job. Maybe it's a loss of a loved one altogether, somebody in your family that died. And it thrusts you into a season where everything changes. Everything is up in the air. And maybe it's for us, and I know that this hits close to home. We can all remember when the pandemic started. We can all remember that early part of March in 2020 when we knew something was coming, but we didn't really know what it was. And then it seemed like all of a sudden it was just here. And we'll come back to that in just a moment, but we've all lived that moment. We all understand what it felt like. But we're not supposed to live in disorientation. We're not supposed to set up shop and make our home and camp out in disorientation. We're meant to move into reorientation. We're meant to move into a time when we're asking questions about, well, what did I learn from this disorientation time? What are the greater lessons? How can I mature as a person because of what I learned, because of what I experienced in this time of disorientation? That's that reorientation time. God, help me to become more grounded and more wise in who I am. Can you locate yourself and where you are in that cycle? When I was kind of preparing this week, I just couldn't help but think back at where I was and where Amber and I were when everything kind of went off that cliff in early March of 2020. Amber and I were on one of the most pristine places that we've ever been, and we've been to some really great places. We were in Big Bend National Park. Our kids, we shipped them off to the grandparents up in Missouri, and it was just Amber and I, and we were kind of glamping. Like, we're not campers. Some of you guys are real campers. We're glampers. And so we had a really kind of nice little bed and breakfast, but it had a beautiful view of the trails, and we would hike. I mean, it was just beautiful. The color and the history and the way that, Texas presents that park beautifully. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous place. You need to go. But we were just loving life. And we were enjoying each other, and we were cooking out in our, nicely fully functional gas stove that we had outside and everything. So we were roughing it. We were really roughing it. But we were just loving life. But we didn't even have cell coverage. So we had no idea what was going on in the outside world, which is a beautiful thing from time to time. But as we got in our car on that Friday and we started driving back towards civilization, we started getting message after message after message. And we heard that there was no toilet paper at H-E-B and that there were runs at the grocery store. And so we stopped on our way back. We're just in case this is real, then we stopped at a grocery store that was on our way back, and we got more groceries, and we came. And it was in that time where we recognized, oh my goodness, this is real. This is serious. And we all lived it together for the next several months. We thought, what is happening? All of what we thought was safe and all what we thought was guaranteed, it wasn't. And like in a moment, it seemed like it all. It's like a rug that was pulled out from under us. And I asked you guys that question in a survey this past week, and some of you guys responded to that survey. And I asked the question, what are the greatest hardships that you experienced during the pandemic? And this is just a sampling of some of the things that you told me. You told me that it was that loss of safety. It was, oftentimes we kind of feel like we bubble wrap ourselves and we can put enough safety kind of blankets around ourselves to where nothing can touch us. Everything is pretty secure. And it was in this time that we realized, no, not really. Not really. We experience division within our communities, whether it be politically or whether it be racially. There was a major racial divide that took place during that time. loss of loved ones. Some of us actually lost friends. And I know that some people in this room have lost friends, family members because of COVID. Stress at work. I know that Emily and all of the other educators, the extraordinary stress, the health care, all of those giving health care, just a new dimensions of anxiety, of going to work and doing your job. Isolation from family and friends just breaks our hearts. People knocking on windows of care facilities because they can't go in to see their family. Some having lost loved ones during that time. Taking care of sick family, the caretakers, the day in, day out of not being able to leave, quarantine, taking care of a loved one. Craving human contact. Can you add to the list? Think in your own mind. What was it for you that was the great hardship, the real thing that just broke you down? Getting COVID. For some of us, our entire family got COVID at one point, and we had the month of COVID for us. That was the August of this past year. So for some of us, it was getting it. I don't think you guys realize this, but multiple times, this is probably 10, 15 different times, I got a call in 2020 and 2021 from someone that was at their end. That they had been broken down, that their anxiety and fear was so through the roof. Or maybe it was a relationship, and they said, can we just sit on my sidewalk? Can you just come and sit with me on my driveway? And can I just talk? Can I just let it all out for just a minute? Because I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I can handle another day. The anxiety levels, the depression levels within the United States are extraordinary. The CDC just recently, within the last month or two, they published that 1 in 3 is clinically depressed in America. So not like I feel down, but like they are diagnosable as depressed. 1 in 3. And they believe that it's directly connected with what we've gone through and the trauma. And we'll continue to deal with this over these next few years for sure. We know that this is not because of some deficiency. Some people are stronger than others. Some of the greats of our faith, some of the Mount kind of Rushmore people within the Christian faith. You think of Martin Luther, a Protestant reformer that lived on regular occasion in some of the darkest places. If you read his memoirs, we also know that Mother Teresa, now Saint Teresa, experiencing the suffering and experiencing the anguish of her ministry in Calcutta and reaching out and trying to locate God in that place. She described her life as a dark night of the soul on regular seasons. I want to encourage you on something. Is that even though you might feel kind of stuck in that disorientation season, some of us might feel like all that anxiety, it might have dissipated a little bit, but I'm still living there. I'm still stuck in that cycle. I haven't gotten to the reorientation place yet. And I want to just encourage you that we will move, that you will be able to move beyond. And that it's in that time of disorientation that some of the most important lessons that you'll ever learn are possible because of the way that we've been broken down in this time, because of how vulnerable that we are, because of all that we've experienced, some of the great lessons that allow us to really move, to take major steps forward in our maturity, in our faith, in our character. They happen during these times these times of disorientation. So I ask you to kind of start thinking in our survey. I ask you to start thinking, what are some of those lessons? What are some of those nuggets? If you're able to back away just a little bit, what are some of those lessons? And you shared a bunch of great things. The first one I'm going to say is, and I'm just going to say that it was you, wasn't it, Lindy? Did you say that our church can overcome everything? I knew it was. She didn't sign it. I just knew it was Lindy. It had Lindy written all over it. But that was one of the things, one of the lessons that Lindy learned, because we have gone through a lot. And obviously we can see we have challenges ahead of us. But our church just accomplished so many really exciting things during this time. And there is so much reason to hope. Some of the other lessons learned is that nothing is certain. Patience is so very important. Many of us learned about our priorities during this time. We have a better sense of being grounded in our own priorities because of what we've experienced. We have an ability to laugh, ability to say, I love you so much quicker, realizing life is short, being able to simplify. That I think that there was some clarity during this time when you're sitting in your home and you're thinking about, priorities that you've had in the past, and you're thinking about the present reality. I think things get kind of clear pretty quick after a few weeks of staring at your stuff. I have to tell you one thing, this empathize. There was a really good friend within the church that said that my natural tendency is to look with suspicion at people, is to expect the worst out of people. He said, that's just my natural tendency. It's just what I've experienced in life. But he said, but I have shifted during this pandemic. And I've shifted to a place where I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt. I tell you what, that's big. We had applause in the table service, because if you've lived in that mindset of expecting the worst, you know how it just grips you. And to be able to shift and make that's a major step of being able to give people the benefit of the doubt and expect the best. Extraordinary. So let's make a shift in what we're talking about this morning and looking at the Isaiah passage right here. This is the basis for the song that Tyler sang just a moment ago. These are actually the lines that we sing. So the Lord has given the prophet this message to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for those who mourn in Zion, to give them a garland or beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of a faint spirit. They will be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, to display His glory. This is the basis, as I said, for that graves into gardens, that our God has the power to transform graves into gardens. And this is a passage of reorientation. It moves us into reorientation. It helps us to realize, to embrace a central tenet of the Christian faith. And I don't want you to miss this. If you take away one single thing, I want you to hear this one thing, is that ours is a resurrection story. Your life, my life, our lives, we are in the midst of a resurrection story where God is powerful and working always, even forcing good out of bad, forcing life out of darkness, forcing healing out of sickness. This is what God is all about. This is the story. This is the Christian story. This is the life of Jesus that we're looking at. That this is a resurrection story. And that is an extraordinary point of hope that I hope that you will embrace during this time. That God makes beauty out of ashes, makes us oaks of righteousness. One thing that I found in my research is that during this time, about 40% of Christians say that their faith was strengthened during this time. And it drew me back to this, making us oaks of righteousness. If we harvest the potential of this season in our own lives, individually and collectively, that God wants to use this to make us oaks of righteousness, to move us forward in maturity like we never could during any normal season, any orientation season. God desires to use this season to make us deeper and wiser, standing firmer and more thoughtful in foundation. I want to ask you, if you would, take out the little insert that's in your bulletin. As I close up, I want to invite you into an exercise, and this is one that you probably can begin, but it might be one that you're still working on weeks from now. I want you to actually engage in something I'm calling this. It's an exercise in reorientation. I want you to write your reorientation psalm. Let's go to this psalm. If you go forward, I'm gonna skip past this one. I didn't put that in there. Let me the psalm passage that we talked about earlier at the very beginning is actually a passage that invites us to kind of reorient ourselves, to think in light of the lessons that we've learned. And so what I want you to do is I want you to start asking these questions of yourself. So this is this reorientation psalm. Lord my God, I called to you for help, and you healed me. So it's looking for evidence in our own lives of the way that God has responded. You turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my funeral clothes and clothed me with joy, that my heart may sing your praises and not be silent. For Lord, my God, I will praise you forever. Now let's go to that end slide, if you would. So I want you to consider how you might, that's a reorientation psalm. That psalmist had experienced a significant trauma in their life. But then their faith and being able to identify God's presence in their life, they were reoriented to see things differently. And so I encourage you, your reorientation psalm might start off by just acknowledging some of these hardships. Some of these your unique hardships that you have carried through this time. And then, through this time, I've learned some of these lessons. I want you to write them down. I don't want you to lose some of the pearls that were entrusted to you during this time, lessons that you couldn't have learned in another time. And then, I want you to start thinking with eyes of faith. I recognize these blessings of this trying season. Over the next several weeks, we're going to be kind of taking one step at a time, asking these questions. And ultimately, I want us to try to arrive at a place where we've reoriented ourselves. We're still going to be learning. We're still going to be evolving and growing. But we've reoriented ourselves in this beautiful, hope-filled truth that God's presence, the Christ child, the hope of the Christmas season, it is right here among us. And it carries us each and every day. And it has the power to transform our lives and lead our church into a very hopeful season ahead. I look forward to sharing that with you. May it be so.